Some mistakes were small. A forgotten lyric, a miscue, a guitar string snapping at the worst possible moment. Musicians have nightmares about this kind of stuff. But then there are mistakes so profoundly, so spectacularly wrong that they stop being mere errors and become the stuff of legends. They become stories you tell over and over, and each time you still can't quite believe that it actually happened. This is one of those stories. It's about a gesture of goodwill that went so catastrophically sideways, it ended up with a world-famous rock band getting physically thrown out of their own show before they even finished the first song. It's about misreading the room on a truly biblical scale. What's the most inappropriate song you could possibly play for an audience in recovery? Seriously, I want you guys to think about it. A song about the joys of a big night out, a sad ballad about drowning your sorrows. It's a tough one. But back in November of 2007, one rock band may have found the single most definitive answer, and they paid the price for it almost immediately. This is the story of how Queens of the Stone Age, one of modern rock's most celebrated and notoriously provocative bands, walked into a drug and alcohol treatment center and played what is, without a doubt, rock's most tone-deaf performance. The year was 2007, and Queens of the Stone Age were on top of the world. Led by enigmatic frontman Josh Homme, the band carved out this unique space in rock with their heavy, hypnotic, and just dangerously cool sound. They were loved by critics, but they could also fill arenas. So when an invitation came to do something different, something more intimate, it seemed like a pretty noble idea. The band was asked to perform a small but stripped down 6-song acoustic set for the patients at an unnamed drug and alcohol rehab facility in California. Now picture the scene. This isn't a festival crowd ready to get wild or packed into a sweaty club. The audience is made up of people in a fragile, vulnerable state. They're there to heal, to get sober, to fight the very demons that rock and roll has, let's be honest, often accused of glorifying. An acoustic set suggests a certain sensitivity, right guys? A softer touch, a moment of connection. The facility was probably expecting a lighthearted, intimate performance for its residents. The stage was set for a special, maybe even therapeutic event. What they got instead was a masterclass in what happens when a band known for pushing boundaries decides to completely obliterate them. It seemed the organizers booked the band without, actually listening to their lyrics, a truly monumental mistake. To really get the sheer scale of the screw-up, you have to understand the song. The song that opened Queens of the Stone Age's set was the opening track from their classic 2000 album Rated R, and it's called Feel Good Hit of the Summer. The title is, well, to put it mildly, sarcastic. The song itself is less of a song and more of a relentless pounding chant. And what is it chanting, you're wondering? The lyrics are just a list of substances repeated over and over, and that's basically it. That's the song. The lyrics, word for word, are nicotine, Valium, Vicodin, marijuana, ecstasy, alcohol, and cocaine. The line is hammered into your head with the force of a jackhammer. It's a song that has already stirred up its fair share of controversy, as big box retailers like Walmart refused to stock the album because of it. Radio stations also wouldn't play it, and the band knew it was provocative. Frontman Josh Homme called it a social experiment to see how people would react to something that was so blunt, so in your face. He argued it wasn't an endorsement, that the song doesn't say yes or no. Co-producer Chris Goss was more direct, calling it a joke and a funny song that wasn't meant to be taken seriously. But context is everything. A joke that kills in a comedy club can get you fired at the office. A song that sounds like a darkly funny jab at rock's excess on an album sounds very, very different when you're playing it live acoustically to a captive audience of recovering addicts. In that specific context, it's perhaps the single worst song in the entire catalog that you could possibly have chosen to open with. So the band takes the stage. The patients are settling in, maybe feeling a little bit hopeful. Then the first chords are strummed. Josh Homme leans into the mic, and instead of some comforting melody, he begins with a chant. You can just feel the air getting sucked out of the room. The mood must have shifted from anticipation to confusion to pure shock in a heartbeat. For the staff, this wasn't some social experiment. It was a slap in the face. It felt like a complete betrayal of trust they'd put in the band. They were there to help people escape from the grip of those exact substances, and here was a famous rock band listing them off like a grocery list from hell. The reaction was fast and pretty decisive. Before the band could even get to the cocaine part, the power was cut. The acoustic guitars and Homme's voice just went silent. But the staff didn't stop there. According to reports from the time, heavy security was called in and the members of the band were manhandled out of the building. They were forcibly removed from their own gig, ejected from the property, and kicked out into the street before the first song was even finished. The whole well-intentioned acoustic set had imploded in less than 3 minutes, ending not with applause, but with a showdown with security guards. On the surface, the story is darkly hilarious. It's a perfect punchline, but the irony here runs much deeper, and it's tinged with a real sadness when you look at the band's own history. This wasn't just a band singing about drugs. This was a band whose members had lived the consequences. The performance wasn't just tone deaf to the audience. In many ways, it was tone deaf to their own lives. Homme himself has been open about his personal struggles. He's talked about going to rehab, not for substance abuse, but for emotional trauma that he said left him broken and nearly destroyed him. His journey through therapy adds a complicated layer to the band's rebellious persona. Even more poignantly, the band's orbit included people who fought life-or-death battles with addiction like Mark Lanegan, a frequent collaborator and one-time member. He knew the horrors of substance abuse all too well. In his brutally honest memoir, Lanegan wrote about his years as a hardcore heroin addict, a life that took him to the absolute bottom. He described being homeless, desperate, and constantly on the edge. For Lanegan, rehab facilities weren't a joke. They were places that ultimately helped save his life and allowed him to have a long career before his death. He'd been sober for over a decade when he passed away. The idea that a band he was part of was kicked out of the exact type of place that gave him a second chance is an irony that's almost too painful to think about. Over the years, the story of the rehab gig has become a cornerstone of Queens of the Stone Age's lore. Some have questioned the details, pointing out that Homme has a flair for myth-taking, for printing the legend. But whether every single detail is 100% accurate hardly matters. The core of the story is a perfect snapshot of the band's identity. They've always been provocateurs, walking a razor's edge between satire and reality, between humor and genuine danger. This incident, whether it was a deliberate prank or just a staggering misjudgment, captures that perfectly. It's a story that's both cringeworthy and, you have to admit, kind of admirable in its sheer guts. It takes a special kind of boldness to walk into a rehab center and play feel-good hit of the summer. It's the perfect testament to a band that has never been afraid to be misunderstood, to push buttons, and to sometimes get it spectacularly, legendarily wrong. It cemented its place in history not just as a failed gig, but as a perfect chaotic fable of rock and roll rebellion, clashing with the messy human consequences of the real world. In the end, no one got hurt, but a legendary story out of terrible judgment was born. It was a collision of two completely different worlds, the raw, unapologetic spirit of rock and roll running headfirst into the fragile, sensitive space of recovery. The result was a show that was over before it even started, an act of goodwill that became one of music history's most awkward and tone-deaf moments. So I have to ask you guys, what do you think? Was this calculated act of rock and roll rebellion a joke that was pushed too far, or was it a massive cringe-inducing mistake? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you dug this story, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more tales from the wild world of rock and roll. And don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories 2.